Welcome to the REDHEADREVEAL Podcast. I am Jenn Pinkerton, your Redhead host, a psychotherapist, high-performance coach, writer, and speaker. As a connection expert, I help people reveal their connectedness within relationships, transforming from the root causes of beliefs and behaviors that hold them back from thriving in life. Let's talk about how you're thriving. All right, so those of you in my audience who love true crime, I've got the guest for you. I got to tell you, when I read this book, Behold the Monster, it was riveting. So I'm really excited to welcome Jillian Lauren on the podcast today. New York Times bestselling author, storyteller, adoption advocate, rock wife, writer of all things. I mean, I am really excited to meet you. So I just want to start off with, wow, what an amazing book. I have to say, what really got you focused basically on this story of Samuel Little and writing this book? Tell me about it.
Well, I always say the story finds you. You don't really find the story. Every time I think I've started a book, I write a totally different one. So I was writing a mystery novel and I scored an interview with this very flashy, amazing, legendary detective named Mitzi Roberts from the LAPD, who has worked on numerous legendary cases and is also the custodian of the very famous cold case, the Black Dahlia.
Yes.
Right. Everyone in LA, every cold case technically has a detective assigned to it, no matter when it's from. So no one wants that case. It's a terrible case to have because you actually have to listen to all the tips and all the, all the people who just figured out the Black Dahlia mystery yesterday. You guys, no one's figuring it out. I'm sorry. Keep trying. But I would like to propose that that's sort of a fascinating piece of LA lore and legend, and that is certainly a woman's life that was lost and will never be solved. Now, here are many more that are far more accessible. And so when I interviewed Mitzi Roberts, I was asking her procedural questions like, if you jump, how do you know if someone jumps or they were pushed? Things like that. And then, it wound up like in one of the more fascinating conversations I've ever had that included, a man who thought he was Haile Selassie and had his son's head in the freezer. And, all of the sort of, most prurient, goriest details that get your attention. And then I asked her at the end of the interview, which I often do, because especially when you're talking about difficult stuff, you want to end on a high note.
Right.
Leave someone feeling good, right? Here's a hero, really. And so, somebody who's like fought to solve murders all her life. And so I said, what are you most proud of? And she said, I am proud of them all, but I did catch this serial killer once, and that was pretty cool. And I thought, oh my gosh, I buried the lead. We're at the end of the iced tea, and I said, how did I miss this? And she's very, she's sassy.
Okay.
You're about to see her. You all are about to see her. There's a new Prime Michael Connelly show coming out about her. Untitled, but based on, it's a spinoff of the Bosch series on HBO.
I watched that.
And it's his next character, who is Renee Ballard.
Okay.
So Connelly's, detective now is Renee Ballard. Often works with Harry Bosch, and Renee Ballard is Mitzi Roberts.
Okay.
So, she is she's been entrancing to many a writer. And so I went and looked up this serial killer, Samuel Little, that she had put away in 2014 for 3 murders. But she suspected him of many, many more across the country. And she couldn't locate, the interest, the resources. There's a big problem with communication between jurisdictions in this country.
A lot of red tape.
And also, no mandated reporting of behavioral patterns.
Okay.
So, he was in prison for 3 murders committed in the late 80s in South Central LA, very famous South Central LA, where in the late 80s, I mean, the community had been so decimated by crack, poverty. It was the first time they used like paramilitary tactics in streets of an urban center. It's a middle-class neighborhood that was in pieces.
Okay.
And it was a bunch of women with their asses hanging out on Figueroa Street trying to make a buck, and no one cared what happened to them.
Really?
Yes, there were at least 7 active serial killers in the late 80s within a 20-block radius of South LA, just like, 15-minute shot from my lovely house here with my barn doors in the background, right? And there were, marginalized women, people of color, drug addicts, and sometimes not. I mean, that's a very blanket generalization. There were so many victims of Samuel Little. It turned out that, they really spanned a very large range. They came from a lot of different places. They were where they were at for a lot of different reasons. But Sam picked them for the reason that no one would care. They were victims who were referred to by police in different cities as an NHI. There's a 187, there's a homicide, on 5th and Main, and it's an NHI. There's a murder with no humans involved. Right? Or just it's a no one.
Okay.
We've got a jumper on Figueroa, it's a no one. So, I became fascinated. I called and said, would you mind me digging into this further? And had the blessing of the LAPD, and I went in for Sam Little, and I thought, if anyone can get this guy talking, I can. And I mean, just because, hi, I mean, have you gotten a word in?
But I love that. I mean, you took this opportunity that you saw there was this connection here. It's like connecting the dots, and you knew that maybe you could find out more. And I love this delicate balance that I think you have where you're trying to investigate, to connect the dots, to understand what's happened and get the story, while also having this advocacy for this delicate balance, the fragile balance of these victims, and bringing that to justice. I mean, I think that the juxtaposition of those two things is really interesting when it comes to your work in true crime.
Thank you. And it was difficult to decide how to portray it because it really wasn't, I couldn't take any number of traditional approaches toward true crime, which is sort of, considered, a genre.
Right.
So where, you expect certain things when you pick up a true crime book, and maybe you don't expect the kind of literary license I took where I take chapters and speak in the, speak from the heads of the victims, speak from the perspectives of the victims, speak from the perspectives of the detectives.
And that makes it so
it's my, it's my 4th book, and my books have ranged widely in topic, and it was the only way to really present it in a way that, as much as I wanted to not be the center of this story, I sort of wind up in the center of all my stories. Uh, I guess maybe I'm not fighting all that hard not to, but my
You
thing
do what
was
works for
to write
you.
a classic piece of reportage, which
Okay.
for those of you who did not go to journalism school means, as if I don't exist,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm watching this thing from above, right? So I was going to write my piece of reportage in which Jillian does not exist
Right.
as a character, right? And of course, that didn't happen. I mean, it became, a story about how like how I got myself into a men's maximum security prison, what it was like, to engage for years and at a certain point daily with who turned out to be now it looks like America's most prolific serial killer, which I don't like to, necessarily um
Glamorize it
it's
to
like
that
say
degree.
it's like
Yeah.
numbers, in your
Right.
numbers, but if you do want one, it's 93 confessions and 64
Yeah.
cases connected. Um, so I went in there with all of my audacity and all of my curiosity and all of my passion.
Mm-hmm.
This
How
true
long did it take?
passion. And then I was like, wait, what? Now what do I do?
How many years did it take you for that process, meeting with him, doing all this? What was that like? How many years of time?
Well, I mean, I had him confessing by the second interview.
Wow.
So it didn't, I mean, the confession started,
Really wanted to
well,
talk.
because he had proclaimed his innocence,
Mm-hmm.
said, I wrote to him for 6 months before I even got into
That's what I was saying. So you had this 6 month of
yeah,
time where you were establishing rapport and you were trying to connect with him.
before,
Mm-hmm.
right, waiting for permission to get in. It's not that easy.
That's right.
Um,
But
and
this is really,
and establishing rapport and without lying, because as much as, I think people will say that, I say one thing to one person, I say another thing to another person, I have some, uh, you might characterize them as manipulative, interviewing techniques.
okay.
No, I don't know. I'm not an officer. I'm not a sworn officer of the law. So,
You have a
as a
lot more gray area to
journalist,
work
as a
with.
journalist, I have, uh, I have ethics that are different. That would be,
Sure.
those of a lawyer or a judge or a law enforcement officer.
Let me
So,
touch on that for a second. So
yeah.
these ethics and this way that you know what works for you to be able to get this information, doing
Oh,
that,
but I didn't though. Did I know? No.
but
How
that
could you
process.
possibly know? I mean, I faced a monster that I had never faced
Yeah,
before.
yeah. But that has to transform you. And on this podcast, we talk
Yeah.
so much about transformation and
Mhm.
pivoting. And at times in which we have either this epiphany in life, we decide to pivot, we decide to grow. There had to be so much growth and transformation for you to be faced with such this type of person and doing this work.
Well, I imagine when you talk about growth and pivoting, I mean, that you must talk about like the crash, right?
Oh,
Like you
yeah,
must talk about when the point where you're in ashes,
for
because
sure. Yes.
otherwise, what?
Hmm.
Like I say, I absolutely believe people can change, people can pivot, we can reinvent ourselves 1,000 times. Look at them, look at my books.
Hmm. Right. Right.
A book about being a slut, a book about being a mom, a novel
Hmm. And
about
okay, you
being in
touched on,
recovery, and also a book about a serial killer.
okay,
Okay,
so
so
let's look at that.
so I have pivoted many times.
We go from slut, we go to recovery, we go to serial killer. You know, I'm going to have to go back to slut.
Mom, you miss mom.
And mom. So I want to go back to slut. Tell me about that book. It was about concubine.
Right.
It was about, explain that to
Well, I
our
mean,
audience.
I was 17 years old when I was, I went to college a year early. So, I was in New York. I was trying to, be an actor and a writer. I was going to NYU. Um, like I said, I went a year early. I don't recommend it. I do not recommend a dorm room on Washington Square Park when you just
High on
turned
my list of places.
when you just turned 17. Or Tisch School of the Arts. Sorry, Tisch School of the Arts, but you know, and it, you know, I wound up being sort of like drafted or, you know, auditioned or groomed.
I would say in this day and age, we would refer that as being groomed. That's what that is.
Groomed, right. I mean, yeah, so I mean, because it was a long time ago for me, I know I look wonderful, everyone. You guys, it's
Absolutely.
most of you are listening, right? But seriously, forever 39. However, it was a long time ago. So I do have to find the different words because at that time it was very important for me to say, you know, I made my own choices.
Right.
No, like I wasn't sex trafficked.
Mm-hmm.
And then I look and I, you know, and now I work with organizations, you know, who, you know,
You see
provide
it differently.
resources. And I look at like every single list and I'm like, oh,
Well, your
like
perspective,
maybe
your perspective
I need a little compassion
Yeah.
too. Something drew me to this, right? Something drew me to this pivot.
That's right.
It's the pivot from I'm going to write mystery novels. I've been obsessed with mystery novels. I'm done with writing about my kids. I did an 8-year blog that was really an 8-year mom blog.
Yeah.
That was really popular and you know, did all the mom blog conferences, which you have never had fun.
You're not the first person.
You let mom bloggers free. Seriously,
I've been
I'll
told.
never regret a second of it. But it got to the point where, you know, my children had their own voice. They have their own plate. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And their friends have access to the internet. And I'm not writing about them anymore online. You know, their story's theirs now. And, you know, my older son has read the book. I've written about him. They understand what I do as a writer. And, you know, if I'm going to write about them, we talk about it first now.
That's great.
So, you know, that pivot was now I'm going to write mystery novels. Like now my kids are a little bit older. Now I'm not getting a call every 5 days. Like your kid just bopped this kid in the head, you know, with a beanie baby. You have to come show up and pick them up. Just when I sat down to write, you know.
Yes.
And then here comes a serial killer into my life, and it nearly tore my family apart, to tell you the truth.
What do you think was the biggest challenge what do you think that was? What was the crux of it that almost tore your family apart? Define that.
A couple of things. I mean, first, now, you know, I think people hear me laugh and talk, and, you know, I have a fairly, I wouldn't say brash. What did the judge describe it as when they subpoenaed my records? Oh, coarse and unlikable, but definitely a journalist. I was described as in open court when I wouldn't turn over my unpublished records.
Okay, so Jillian, I want to ask about too.
The pivot
is yes, with that pivot too. I read about this advocacy you have around adoption. And I'm like, how does this fit in? You're so interesting with all these different pieces of you that all connect in such a varied way. I was loving, it's like this tapestry of all these different things you've experienced and done. Tell me about that part of it too, and how that fits into everything.
You know, I think that it's not, you know, to say like, oh, I wrote the mom book, I wrote the slut book, I wrote the serial killer book, that these things sound so separate, but really one led to another.
Yes.
You know, like it's not in a linear way, but in the way that like both our trauma compounds, but our empathy also compounds.
Yes.
You know, and it's like these two things are always fighting. Right? Like the days that I'm just like, why would I get out of bed with what I know? You know, people say, are you scared of Sam Little? Were you scared to be sitting next to this man who killed people for fun? And I have been far more scared of the people who dismissed his victims and still do, and the way they talk, and the and the way that we assign worth in our society, and the health care that's not available. And like you're talking about adoption, my children were adopted. My older son, 16, he was adopted from Ethiopia. My younger son is turning 12 in, I can't do the math, 10 days.
Okay.
We adopted him when he was 3.5 from the foster care system in Los Angeles, and really navigating my way through the Department of Social Services in an urban center. I started doing more advocacy work to support teenage mothers,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, to try and like give them, like workshops, tools, mentors, support so they can, possibly keep their families together. Um, and all this work is very grassroots, and it tends to be
Definitely.
small, like there are large philanthropic, amounts of money you can give, and please do, to everywhere that supports, NamUs, the Doe Project. I can give you a list. Let's do it at the end, maybe.
Yeah.
Of, the organizations that I do work for now. And, I've always said, I teach writing as well, and people say, like, they think they'll be happy, if they're writing, right? They're not
Writing,
happy
they'll be
doing their
happy.
day job. If they
Yes.
just to write that book, they'd be
Sure.
happy. That book that's all in their head.
Right.
How many like kindergarten parties I've sat at and heard how many books are in people's heads.
I bet.
I'm just like, I promise you, when you sit down every day and put that minimum hour and a half in, sorry guys, that's what it takes to write a book.
That's right.
Minimum hour and a half. And really, it should be kind of 4 if you want to get it done in any time,
True.
And
you are
so,
you
and it's every day. It's not when you feel like it. It's not when you want it. It's not when the muse comes and finds you and you feel like writing poetry. It's you sit your ass in a hard chair every day and you face the page.
Okay, so stop on that, because I want to make sure our listeners or viewers are really hearing that, because that's a pretty amazing message. Here you are, this amazing writer with so much success, and I think your reputation speaks for itself. I mean, just I everything I've read about you, everything I've read personally, I was so enlightened by you. And you're here giving this beautiful freebie advice to people that if you don't do that a minimum an hour and a half a day, you're not getting where you want to go. And here you are, pivoted and transformed, and you've done all these things. And I think it's always beautiful when we can really let people understand that that's one of the things that has gotten you to where you are. Being able to have
100%. I do all the other stuff too. I do
Mhm.
the vision boards. I do I do the bullet journals. I do the morning pages. I do everything, and I sit my ass in that chair.
Mhm.
And it is very rarely fun.
Mhm.
And I mean it, turn off everything. I don't mean an hour and a half of check your email every time you don't know how to end a sentence.
Right.
Because if you do that, your brain can actually multitask. Multitasking is a fallacy. So if you start to study criminals, which I did, and then you start to study like deviant brain
Behavior. Yeah.
behavior,
Mhm.
right? Like what you learn is that you cannot multitask, like
No, you're
there are
all in.
these
You are all in.
pathways. Imagine they're like freeways in your
Yes.
brain. You
Yes.
can't drive on 2 of them at the same time. You got to take an exit. So you take an exit, then you got to get back on, and already you've lost that time.
That's right. And the momentum is
Right.
gone.
So Stephen King does 15 pages a day. I've never made it to 15.
I got a feeling.
I tried for 5.
I got a feeling
I tried
that
for 5.
the next book, you'll be doing it. I know it.
I tried for 5, and you know what? It never gets easier.
Mhm.
It never gets easier. You think it would get easier, but I feel like you have to approach each story, and also just every situation in life. Approach it with a beginner's mind, with curiosity. If I think I knew everything I needed to know, from writing a book, which was, did not, I mean, definitely involves some criminal activity, and
Sure.
also being, the mistress of the richest man in the world, and sort of held captive in a palace in Southeast Asia. I know everything sounds like a giant lie, except believe me, all I have to say is if this stuff is in print, just trust that it has been legally vetted.
Well, the thing is, I'm a firm believer.
So much.
Okay, but Jillian, I'm this firm believer that we can't make up anything as good as what the truth is. And I encourage people to go for your truth because that is where everything lies. And here you are speaking of such. I mean, what you've done in your life, what you've experienced and written about it. I mean, I think, let's see, I had down here. So we've got Behold the Monster. We've got Everything You Ever Wanted. Some Girls, Pretty. I mean, all these books have all these different focuses. And it's all your life. It's everything that you have touched or experienced. And I think that's such an amazing story.
It's every time I sink into it and I approach it with, like drive and curiosity, and what I've found, like I don't find, to circle back around, that writing makes me happy.
Mm-hmm.
Writing doesn't make me happy. Writing hasn't always helped my family, but money or no money. And mostly it's no money, guys.
Well, it's different
Okay, guys, sorry.
I know,
Writing,
I know.
if you're
I'm a
going to
writer as
writing for
well.
the money, if your
Yes.
dream of your novel,
Mm-hmm.
it's a hustle, hustle, hustle. Till my husband's a rock star. I'm a best-selling author. I am hustling every day.
That's right.
And
And it takes a
if
different
you have any other option, take it.
Don't you think it takes a different kind of person, though, Jillian, to be a writer? Because it is a different type of approach to life. I'm a writer as well, and I hear it. I know it. It's you have to love that craft so much because it isn't about the money and it isn't about the success. It is comes from somewhere very different. And I do find that most successful writers have experienced some sort of either trauma, some sort of unresolved feeling or experience, some sort of observation or perspective on life that is unique and different. And that's what propels people to say, I've got to get this out. This can't be in my head. I've got to get it out. I want to share it. I want to feel it. And I'm going to heal through feeling it and putting it out there. It's so cathartic.
Well, I mean, here's your other option. Lie down and die.
Yes.
Really? I mean, for me, that was my other option.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do? Lie down and die? Or are you going to find some meaning in this? And so when I say, writing's not going to make you happy, I don't really know what happy means, but I just think that there's a fantasy about I'll write this novel and then I'll be a novelist and I'll be like Dorothy Parker, which that's a terrible example. They drank herself to death in a bathtub, but they all did. But really, like, what it has given me is a very solid, I know that if I keep digging, if I keep working, like, it will give me a sense of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I have a sense of meaning in my life because, like, as a writer, don't you look at things differently, right? Like, you pay attention, you notice like people's inflections, you notice,
Well,
the flowers that are in bloom, or
the higher
what
level
the
of
room smells like.
yes, yes.
Or, if somebody's nails are chewed, or little things like that, like things that most people are thinking about themselves all the time and think that everyone else is also thinking about them, but they're wrong because everyone else is also thinking about themselves.
True.
But I think the gift that we're given as writers is just for a minute here and there.
Mm-hmm.
We get to look at the world around us.
Yes.
And not just think like, what are you thinking of me? How am I performing? Am I cool? Am I smart? Am I good enough? Am I an advocate enough? Have I solved enough murders for you? Am I gruesome enough for you? Am I too gruesome for you? Am I slutty enough for you?
I got to go back.
Have I relieved you of every bit of your shame? If
Okay,
not,
so
let me do so now.
I got to go back because that is, I mean, let's drop the mic on that. Am I good enough? Have I written enough? Have I done enough? And I mean, that is the core thing of what are we all searching for, right? Are we enough? And here you are, have done so many things, and you're able to sit here and say, sure, it's the universal condition, right? That we're all wondering these things. We're all thinking these things.
Well, my younger son is on the autism spectrum, and so I went to a special preschool with him,
Yes.
which was remarkable, and also one of certainly the hardest things I've ever done in my life. I had to go to the school with him. It was like 5 kids
Mm-hmm.
classroom, and we had to go to therapy twice a week, like individually and as parents, as a
Yes.
group. It was like immersion, and I mean, I think it saved our lives really as family. And he's performing it greatly. He's on a field trip right now at the Science Center without me. Oh my gosh, because I'm here with you. Hi, everyone.
Yay, that's great. I love it.
Took my goodness field trip, and it's going to be okay.
That's right.
And he fought through it and stuff, but
Yes. So Jillian, I hear you saying, here you are with your experiences in life, your son being able to what you went through with your son and your family, and therapy changing you, and writing changing you, and this search for figuring out who you are, and being able to do so, and also reinvent yourself so many times in these books too. I
I
love
mean,
it. I
I
love
think,
it.
reinvention, is it reinvention? Is it survival? I always think, people there's a lot of conversation about, true crime. Is it prurient? Is it exploitative? And, the primary audience for true crime is women. And I'll tell you, my 16-year-old son has, in the great tradition of handsome, charming underachievers, has, his girlfriend's like super smart, plays first violin, incredibly ambitious, drives him crazy. Like, how are your college applications coming? I'm like, thank you, Lucero.
We'll be working on that. Thank you.
Um, and that they read true crime.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're really interested. They want to talk to me about it. They want to ask me about it, and they're scared.
Mm-hmm.
They're scared. They want to know. And I was like, here you go. Like, they want to know from me, because they think I'm like some, like Dragon Slayer.
Yes.
And I'm like,
I mean, you're
sorry,
covering,
kids.
but
The 16-year-old girls.
you're addressing this traumatic subject matter. I mean, it
And
is.
also, like, I mean, by the time I was their age, I had been sexually abused
Mm-hmm.
more than once. And I imagine, I mean, statistically, that's true for 1 in 4 of them.
Yes.
Yes. So, we don't talk necessarily directly about that. They know this serial killer piece, because
Yeah.
that's a loud piece, right? And they go to the comic book store around the corner from school, and they want superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm out there fighting serial killers who,
Yes.
are killing women for fun, and trans women for fun. And, I'm a hero to them, but, they don't see the real cost that it took my family, that my kids asked me, like, how could you? I mean, the only time I could visit him, and the only time I could visit Sam was weekends, you know?
And you were gone a lot.
How could you go to prison when I had my soccer playoffs? You want to talk to this beast?
Mm-hmm.
And then COVID came, and I had been able to sort of keep his voice away from
Mm-hmm.
my family. But I recorded him when we talked in the prison. You can't record him at all. It was all done from memory.
Yes.
And we talked on the phone, which became every day when I was doing the documentary, Confronting a Serial Killer, streaming almost everywhere, directed by Joe Berlinger, who's the primary director
I've
in
got to
that.
watch this. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's 5 episodes,
Okay.
called Confronting a Serial Killer, and it's about essentially me pursuing these confessions of
Mm-hmm.
Sam's, that weren't just, I wasn't the one that Sam confessed to officially. He officially confessed to law enforcement. Of
Yes.
course, like I can't solve murders, but what I can do is investigate.
Mm-hmm.
I can be a curious person. I can be an investigative journalist. So can all of you. And Bukowski wrote fascinating things about working at the post office.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go and crack a serial killer to start like looking at the meaning in your life, where you find it, like where you find it and where you can bring it. Because sometimes it's not like, I'm like, how come I got stuck with this?
But
Really? Like,
for viewers,
when I got this story, I thought, oh my gosh, I lucked out. I got this underreported serial killer. No one knows how many people he killed. I don't know how many people he killed. Just so happened there was a huge FBI investigation going on at the same time, so that I became involved. My interviews became involved in the investigation.
so that timing was really helpful for that.
I would say that they would probably say both. There's typically tension between law enforcement and reporters,
Right.
right?
Right.
We want this story, and they
Yes.
would like us to go away.
Right.
They
Right.
figure it out and then report it as as their narrative. And I'm like, well, except my job is not that. I'm not a propagandist. I don't trumpet what your press release. I am here investigating this. Also, my heels are dug in. Like I had that guy and I was like, no one else is getting this story.
Well, and in your rapport that you created and this constant communication, you're able to show a totally different perspective and you're looking at it from a very different lens. And I think that's
Yeah.
one of the most amazing things about true crime is when writers such as yourself are able to really expose it in the underbelly of it in a very different way than what anyone would ever know otherwise. And I
Sure,
find
'cause I'm asking questions, like police are looking for checkable facts that they can match with cold cases, right? Or possible, like remaining DNA evidence from, times when it's mostly degraded. And, most of these cases were solved without DNA.
Mhm.
Which is, now we think it's the panacea for everything. But this was a lot of like very traditional gumshoe work because the evidence was old, destroyed by Katrina. Not every city has storage for all the evidence. You know,
Very different way to solve a crime, for sure.
yeah. So it was. I mean, once again, beginner's mind. I didn't go in with a journalism degree. I went in as a literary writer, so I had a different perspective. I asked Sam different questions. Police are trying to match cases, and I'm trying to figure out what the hell? Trying to figure out what we're all trying to figure out
Yeah,
about serial killers. I mean, can I swear? Like,
absolutely.
what the fuck? Why? Why?
Hmm.
Why? It's what everyone asks, like, why? What makes this monster? And, and I do have like, a list of things. And also, a piece, there is a piece of this, and I'm convinced of it, that there is no why. There is only wanting and taking,
Hmm.
right? And why this is the want. is epigenetics, it's genetics, it's it's
Trauma.
experiential, it's trauma, it's abuse,
Yes.
it's pornography, it's all of those things. I'm not demonizing pornography. Everyone don't freak out. It's just like it is a common thread, violent pornography. They serial killers do tend to gravitate toward it at a young age. Same thing with like hurting animals.
Yeah. And that's a huge
Bedwetting. I
yeah.
mean, it
Mhm.
you can't say A plus B equals C. So, if you like porn, don't freak,
Right.
but
Right.
you're probably not a serial killer.
Yes. But you can recognize
There.
there's common themes and threads. It's almost like
Right, but
ingredients of a
there's still no
recipe.
why. There's
Mhm.
no why. You know what I mean? You have to like look to your heart and say, I think that the question is really not why a Samuel Little, but in what ways do we behave?
Mhm.
Do we behave in such selfish and without empathy and completely compelled by just greed and want and lack of impulse control, the way we tend to even glorify that, in our society. We may even elect it president, that kind of sociopathy, that kind of, I'll do anything. I'll lie, I'll steal, I'll kill, but I mean,
And
depends
the
on.
world is an interesting place these days. And you look back at things such as serial killers, you look back at people and where all this is created and the why. And I just find that that is so unbelievably interesting. And your perspective in Behold the Monster and the insight you gave, and basically this viewpoint of other people, how they were thinking and what they were thinking, and how you positioned that, I think made it such a different type of true crime book that I've ever read. So I
Thank you. Yeah, I
really,
mean, I really like both try to deliver, like I deliver, I always want to tell stories that entertain, right? And get you emotionally.
Mhm.
Because if I don't do that, why would you keep reading?
Yeah, right,
Right? Like I gotta get you in so that I can give you my 1, 2. I gotta get you close
right.
enough.
Yes,
You know?
yes.
And it's like I'm urging people to look at the ways, not that Sam Little is so different from us, but the ways that we also like justify, our wants and needs and the way that we assign worth to
Mhm.
people. Like how
And I,
many people said, "Oh, these victims, these victims, these victims" to me. And then, "Oh, but we're changing the cover to just be his face." Oh, but but it's going to be all about the victims. And I was like, well, I mean, the people want to know about a serial killer.
that's right.
Also, like I'm giving you the serial killer
Yes.
and the victims as best I can.
Well, I love this
Best
very
I can do for that.
perspective. I love the very perspective. I love the different viewpoints that you have. And I'm going to go back and read these other books because, we touched on slut, recovery, concubine, grooming. I mean, I've got a lot of reading to do, but
I'll
you
send them to you.
I love having you on today. I feel like this was such your energy is so contagious, and I feel like this is such an amazing experience. And I know everybody listening is going to be doing some heavy reading. And
I
I
hope so. And I just
want
hope, like I just urge everyone to just open your mind, open your heart, open your curiosity, and say, like, let's think for a second. Just if it's not the prettiest blonde who went missing on spring break in Daytona Beach, still that person is a child of God, if I
that's
may.
right. Mm-hmm. I think it's
That's
right.
from a detective I talked to in North Carolina, and I said, do you really believe in this closure thing? And he said, closure is sort of one of those words I use because it's easier for sound bites. He said, but sometimes families are there, sometimes they aren't. He said, I work for God's children. And I've just always taken that with me, like I work for God's children.
Well, I think you're doing some amazing work in doing just that. So let's stop off there. And I want to pivot.
And also we have my
Oh, yeah. Tell us about that really quick. Go ahead.
So we are going to give away a special prize to one of your readers,
Love
one of your listeners, I'm sorry.
Yeah, love it.
One of your amazing listeners to Brilliant Podcast. This is a magic 8-ball, a Behold the Monster magic 8-ball, and it's meant to represent, I think we have a lot of dialogue in this culture about, oh, you don't deserve that, girl, or you don't deserve this, or you deserve this. And I think that we don't always get what we deserve, and we play it as it lays. So if you buy a copy of my book, Behold the Monster, you can comment here, comment.
I think so.
here,
Definitely comment.
Yes.
Go on YouTube and comment and make a comment of the podcast. Absolutely. And then you can
and then you're going to get a special prize.
Love it. Yeah. We'll enter in things and we can pick someone that wants to get this amazing prize. I love that. So
we'll just pick it random.
Yes, we'll pick it random. You got it.
Buy a book, and then I'm gonna shake the 8-ball and we'll see what your prize is gonna be.
Go ahead, let's do it.
All right.
Okay. Drum roll. If I could do a drum roll right now, I would.
No.
What is it?
You get a signed hard copy.
Oh, that is awesome, Jillian. Okay, well, I can't wait
to tell you. You got a really good one.
But we're going to send that out. So thank you so much for blessing us today with all this information, this lovely experience, and doing this for my listeners and my viewers. So I'm looking forward to.
Thank you so much. And also, please, we have more information. And also, if you're a victim, or you have questions, or you have cold case in your life, you have questions about, please look at my website, JillianLauren.com. We have all the resources there.
That's great. Now, I have to tie this up with my guest question, because everybody who listens to me or watches me knows that I ask every guest a question for the future guest, and we continue that on. So the last guest asked a question, leaving it for you, which is, what can we learn from grief? What would you say to that, Jillian?
I learn to really care that I just saw my first woodpecker of the season on my tree outside. I'm a birder. I'm an ornithologist.
Yes.
It's my hobby. And I'm like this. I'm like, I've got a woodpecker. I have my little list. I've got orioles. I've got my house finches. I've got turtle doves. I've got hawks. I've got crows. And now I just saw my first woodpecker. So what grief has brought to me is like, I had that moment. I've had a lot of grief, and I know that like many people don't get to even have that little ordinary, beautiful little miracle.
A simple pleasure
in their life that, simple pleasures always sounds like, my grandmother would say to make you not want something better.
But it's the principle.
It's like, don't ask for this ski trip. Take up crocheting,
The small thing.
I don't mean it like that, but I just mean it like it does make me treasure the beauty to have, to have to look at the really the down and dirtiest piece of, the darkness in us makes the light seem brighter.
It does. It really does.
So that I think is what grief can do for you.
So what,
or did for me in any case.
What question would you like to leave for somebody else? What do you want to leave everyone with? The next guest will answer this. What would that question be?
What does survival mean to you?
Oh, that's really good. That's a really good one. Well, I'll look forward to seeing what that is, and we'll keep you in the loop of who answered that and how they answered it. This has been amazing, Jillian. Thank you again for coming on the Redhead Reveal podcast, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Jillian.